Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming. Welcome to today's National Geographic Learning Professional Development session, Think, Pair, Share, How to Teach Values Effectively in the Young Learner Classroom. We're just opening up the room and we know that people will be streaming in. So we're going to give our participants some time to come into the room and get settled. Please say hello in the chat box. Tell us where you are from, where you are right now, how you're doing. Share, share, share. We'll give everyone 1 to 2 minutes to come in, and then we'll get started with a little introduction and some important information, and then we'll hand things off to our very, very esteemed speaker today. Okay? So just let's give a minute or two. Hello again to all our participants. Thank you so much. Thank you for saying hello and where you're from. We're going to give everyone just a couple more seconds to come into the room, and then we're going to get started, okay? All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. I hope you can hear me. I hope you can see me as well. Please type into the chat box that you can hear and see me. Excellent. I see yeses. So we're going to get started. It's 2 minutes past the hour. So hello and welcome. My name is Dave, and I'm a member of the National Geographic Learning Team, and I'm based in Boston, Massachusetts, in the United States. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar, Think, Pair, Share, How to Teach Values Effectively in the Young Learner Classroom, presented by my good friend, Dr. Jodi Crandall. Now, before I introduce today's speaker, I have just a couple things to go over with you. First, as always, we recommend attending today's webinar with as strong an internet connection as you can. That usually means a wired connection and not wireless, if that's possible. We know it isn't always possible, but it does prevent some of the connectivity issues sometimes our participants experience. Now, if you do lose sound, or you can't see the PowerPoint, or you can't see the speaker at any point, we suggest closing the window completely and coming back into the webinar with the link that was emailed to you, the same link you used to join right now. However, if for any reason you are completely disconnected, don't worry. You will receive a link to the recording of the session, as well as the slides from the session, and a certificate of attendance in an email within the next few days. So, don't worry if you have any issues, but if you do, just try closing and coming back in. Today's session will be interactive. So there will be multiple choice polls and questions in the chat box and videos for you to watch. So please interact, answer the questions. We look forward to your participation. Last, there will be a very short survey that you will be directed to once the webinar ends. It's only a couple questions. We really hope that you answer the survey and give us your feedback. Those surveys tell us what content you want from us. They tell us what sessions to plan, and they tell us how to be better. So we hope that you will answer the questions. Now, I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker. Dr. Jodi Crandall is Professor Emerita and former Director of the Language, Literacy, and Culture PhD program and co-director of the MA TESOL program at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. She has worked in all areas of ESL, EFL, including teaching, curriculum and materials development, standards development, and teacher training. She is a frequent invited speaker at national and international conferences, as well as an external reviewer of many educational programs for universities, not-for-profit organizations, and government agencies. Dr. Crandall is also the author of more than 100 books, articles, chapters, and monographs, and a frequent speaker on all of those things. She is a series editor and author for many National Geographic learning materials, including Impact, a series for teenage learners of English, Our World and Explore Our World, 2 series for young learners of English, Welcome to Our World, a series for very young learners of English, and co-author of Teaching Young Learners English, a professional development title for teachers of young learners. Whew. She does quite a lot. I have been working with Dr. Crandall for a very long time, and I am very fond of her. Without further ado, please let me welcome Dr. Jodi Crandall.
Thank you so much, Dave. You're always so very kind. It's wonderful to be here with you all today and to see that there's so many of you. I hope you're all doing okay during this very, very challenging time. I've been sheltering in place for several weeks, but actually it feels like months, and I'm sure many of you are in the same situation. We're likely to be quarantined for even longer. But today, maybe we could take our mind off of the global pandemic and actually do some of the things that we want to do that will make us much happier. We're going to think about our young learners and how we can help them to become really valuable, good, local, and global learners. We really want them to be good local and global citizens. We're going to begin by actually taking a poll. I'd like to know who's here. I see you're from many, many countries, and it's wonderful to have you here. But I'd like to get a sense of the age of the children that you teach. And in some cases, you maybe are not teaching, maybe you're doing teacher training or you're administering. But will you take a couple of minutes just to fill out this poll? Check all that apply. If you're teaching, maybe some of you are teaching children that are 6 to 12, and maybe some of you are even teaching teenagers and adults. Would you just indicate that, and you can type some of that in? Somebody asked me where I am while you're typing in. I'm in Washington, D.C. Sorry, I should have told you that. And we were a little late getting the peak of the coronavirus, but we're at it now. While you're typing, I'm going to also tell you that I prepared this webinar at home, and what I had available to me were materials that I actually had co-edited, for example, as David talked about, with Our World. And also I had a complete set of another series called Look. So you're going to see a lot of examples from these 2 series, but I'll try throughout to tell you some of the ways in which you could actually apply this to any materials that you have, any of the units, the materials, the curriculum. But I had to use what was available because I could not leave my house. I'll give you just a couple more minutes to type, or to actually check. Okay, it looks like people are just about done. Okay, so we have pretty much equal distribution. A few more people who are doing other, and I hope some of you will type in what it is you're doing. I see teens. Some of you maybe are also administrators or doing. I see young adults. So just go ahead and keep typing in so I can get a sense of the types of students you have in the level. Okay, let's go then to the next slide. Okay, thank you. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what do we mean by values. Here are some definitions. Oh, but you know what, Dave, we missed one. We missed one where they type in other values. Is that still there? Huh, okay. It looks like it may not be. Nope, no problem.
It's here.
Yeah, there it is. There it is. Thank you. Yep. So in this case, what I'm asking you to do is to see which of these values, I just picked some that actually we're going to focus on today, you currently teach in your own classes. And so there are clearly many, many more we could have had. Something got out of order. Okay. That's great. Okay, I think that gives us a pretty good sense. Ooh. So Dave, can we end the poll? Thank you. Let's go ahead. If you're continuing to type, that's fine. Let's talk a little bit about what we mean by values. Here are some very interesting definitions. Values help us to determine what's important to us. They guide our ideals, our thinking, and our behavior. They affect how we understand others in our environment and the decisions we make and how we act. And the one I like the very best is the one from Emile Durkheim, who says, and I put it in my own words, values enable us to feel we are part of something bigger than ourselves. So there probably are other values that you're currently teaching in your classroom. Put down some of those. We're going to go one more. In the chat room, type some of the ones that you are currently using that perhaps are an addition to the ones that we've just checked off. And you just keep doing that while we continue to talk. Most of you said you do all of them. If there's some additional ones, go ahead and type. I'm seeing love, responsibility, courage. Great. Yeah, lots of them. Cooperation, wonderful. Okay, so why do we teach values to young learners? And I want you to think about this. Reflect about your own life. When did you first learn some values? Can you think of one that you learned very early in life? I imagine that you learned it at home. I imagine you learned it with your family, maybe with some elders, with your parents. But what's really important here is to know that we aren't born with values. We have to learn them. And we learn them first from our families, but schools and teachers are very important in helping students to learn good values by setting up contexts in which children can think about how these values apply to them. What we want to make sure is that they're positive values, that they help our learners to become good local and global citizens. And we're going to be talking a lot about the importance of both good local and global citizens. So why teach English? And if I teach values in an English class? Well, to begin with, English, as you all know, is a global language, and we live in an interconnected world. And part of the way that we stay connected is through English. We use English in so many different contexts. It's a major language of the internet. And most important for your learners is the vast majority of English speakers around the world speak it as an additional language. It is not a foreign language anymore. It'd be very hard to find a place in which there is no English, either available through technology or through media, through tourism, through classes in schools or classes after school. It's actually an additional language which these people living, all of us living in this global interconnected world, use as a way to communicate with each other when we don't share another language. So your learners are going to use English with people from around the world. So they really need to understand and respect cultural differences. And they also need to share their ideas and culture with others. They need to understand the world in which they live, and they need to help make it a better place. So in front of you here is one way of teaching values, and this should look pretty something that you've seen before. In fact, you probably even have in your classrooms. The very simplest classroom rules are the ones here on the left-hand side, with some illustrations and very simple rules of raising your hand, listening, being a friend, and helping to clean up. I was really glad to see that being a friend is here, because other those are the kinds of things that somehow teachers use to manage the class. But being a friend is also pretty important. The rules over here are just a little bit more, they're obviously for older learners. There are more of them. They're more complex. But notice they still have some of the same values, but there's some new ones. Share with others. Say please and thank you. Respect each other. And then the ones you might expect: listen when others talk, clean up and help out and follow directions. The ones I really like the best, however, are the ones in the middle, because everything is expressed as we. Now, again, has to be for older learners because they now have sentence structures. They can use the verb to be. But we are a team. We are positive. We're kind. We're honest. We encourage each other. And how I interpret these is that the teacher is one of those. So everybody is on a team. Everybody is positive. So it's inclusive. One thing that I would recommend is, if you are creating classroom rules with your learners, that you let them help you make the rules. Because if they help make the rules, then it's a lot easier for them to think that it's worth following. I'm seeing some of you are having a little difficulty hearing. Sorry, I can try to make it a little louder. Okay. So a very effective way to help students acquire positive values is to engage them in what is called a think, pair, share activity. And I think many of you already know what this is. You even use it in your classes. It's a cooperative activity in which a teacher asks a question and then allows some time for the learners to think, to reflect on it, to think. Then that learner goes and pairs with takes a partner, shares what he or she has answered with a partner, and then shares it with the whole class. But what I want you to notice here, since many of you are probably teaching digitally or virtually right now, you're teaching online, is it doesn't always have to be the way in which maybe we thought about it. So first, it can be done during class, yes, but there's no reason it can't be done before class. That you give a prompt to a student, a question, and ask them to think about it, and then they can answer with paper and pencil. They can use a laptop. They can actually provide any kind of what they're thinking about in any form. Then, when they share with a partner, they can walk across the room if they're in the room, but there's no reason at all that they can't be using something like in writing. They could communicate via WeChat or one of the many apps that are possible. And when it comes time to share with the whole class, normally we think of it in terms of speaking verbally, but there's no reason at all it can't be in writing. And in fact, in many cases, It could be via polling software like we just did. It could be with the whiteboard. It could be total class discussion. And one other thing, today, many people actually increase this part to have two pairs. So one pair then talks to another pair, and that's called then a square. So it's think, pair, square, share. Now, why is this so valuable? Oh, wow. We're missing something. Okay. Here. Here's a good example of using think, pair, share. Here's a typical value. Be neat. We put away your things. Be neat at school and at home. But think about how you're going to get students to actually think about this and to be able to actually respond. And so here we have a question. Are you neat at home and at school? And what do you do? And so that gives them something then it's concrete. It personalizes it. It relates it to their lives, and they have a chance to think about it and then to share with a partner and then with the whole group. But there's something else that I love about this slide. What else is being communicated here? Do your students, when they're neat, is this what your classroom looks like? Maybe for some of you. But I think one of the other things that we're learning with this value is that being neat isn't always the same, that people have many different ways of being neat. And this is one way. This is a classroom in Tokyo, but your class may be quite different, and your learners may be putting things away in a different way, cleaning up in a different way. So one of the things we're trying to do even very early, and this is from a very low level, is we're trying to express that values may be the same, but how they're expressed or how they're realized, how people actually show that they have that value might in fact differ. So why think, pair, share? Well, one very good reason is because they have time to think, and because they then talk to a partner, they actually have some time first to relate it to their lives and to find the words to use, which is rehearsal time, but they continue to have rehearsal time because when they talk to one of their friends, then they once again have to make themselves understood, and they have a little bit of feedback, and they can make it a little bit clearer. And so what we're doing is improving their ability to communicate. But really what's also so important is it builds collaboration. They work with a partner and then sometimes with two partners. It builds communication skills, and it also helps develop a sense of both community and of diversity of views. And I know some of you are teaching in environments where you think that you have pretty much a monocultural environment, that your students all come from pretty much the same place. I think once you begin working with these kinds of questions, you're going to find out that even though they may all be from the same community and they may all speak the same first language, they could be really quite different in many, many ways. There's going to be a diversity in lots of ways, and particularly a diversity of views. So we want to make sure that we keep pointing out the ways in which we are similar, the ways in which we are different, but the most important thing is the ways in which we express some of these common values. So think, pair, share can be used in almost any activity that you could be thinking of. They desperately need it in order to be able to develop some of these critical 21st century skills, which are commonly known as the 4 C's. In think, pair, share, they begin with critical thinking. They think about and reflect and apply it to their lives. Then they communicate to a partner, so they communicate and collaborate. And what's really nice about it is they often have an opportunity to be creative because, in fact, these ideas come from them. These 4 skills are critical for the success of your students, not only in school, but throughout their entire lives, in their future work. And it's never too early to begin developing them. They really need to think critically about the world in which they live. They need to be able to work in teamwork and work together. They need to be able to develop good communication skills that they can use, and they need to be creative in their approaches to life. So in this webinar, we're going to look at some values we can help our learners to think about. And I'm really pleased that many of you already are dealing with these in your classrooms, and we'll see if there's some new ways in which you might be a little bit either more direct, or in fact, some of the things that you're doing would enhance what we're talking about. So we're going to look at how we can help our learners to be thinking about caring about or being kind to each other, to friends, to other people, to animals, and that's so important, to the environment, but that'll come later. To celebrate their community and culture. It's really important that they understand their own and they can celebrate it, but it's also important that they accept or appreciate differences in people, in cultures, in traditions. We're going to talk about how they can work to improve and protect the environment, and then how they can think creatively and critically. And of course, in the process, this is what we really want, is for them to become both good local and global citizens, or what have now been called global citizens. So what is a global perspective? Interesting word. We don't really know for sure where it comes from. It appears to have come out of Japan, where someone was trying to apply agricultural practices from other countries and adapting them to Japanese farms. And so you can see how that is both global and local. And I think that's what we want our learners to really develop, which is a global perspective. And here's the way in which we might think about it. Education needs to help prepare pupils to deal with future challenges, which are both of global and local character. The relation between the global and local can be described as a global perspective. So we always want to start with where our learners are, the local perspective, but we also want them to be aware of and to understand a much larger world than the smaller one in which they live. So here are some very simple, good values for being a good citizen in the community. The first one, share your toys. And it says, I share my toys with my friends. And there's questions are, what toys do you share with your friends? It's a think, pair, share. It's really important. If you're now doing this online, some suggestions. You might ask children to actually hold up or take a picture of their favorite toy, and then they can share that toy with the rest of the group. Those toys could be in a part of a blog. It could be a collage. But the important thing is to let them share their toys, and then they can say perhaps what the toy is. And you could even follow that up with a poll. How many children brought a teddy bear? How many children bought trucks? How many the other kinds of toys that they brought? And what I like to do when I do something like that is I create a bar graph. And what I do, instead of saying 5 children chose to bring a truck or to share a truck as their favorite toy, I would instead put the names of 5 children on that bar graph. And I would put at the top truck, and then there would be the names of the 5 children who are sharing their toys of their truck. And so what you do is you personalize the bar graph, and everybody can see who in the class has shared which toys. The one on the right, being a good sport, play by the rules. If we can see that they're playing basketball, and this is in Cuba, I think I would ask the learners to talk about if I was doing it online, to talk about their favorite sports. So ask them what's their favorite sport, and then can they tell you one rule that's important. Now, be fair and take turns is one of the major rules in a lot of sports. But are there some other rules, something that you can or can't do? And then you might be able to talk a little bit about what does it mean to play by the rules, and what does it mean to be fair. So I think both of these, while they're intended to be used in class at one point, they're very easy to be used online as well. Now this is another from a workbook from Look. It's called Be a Good Friend. And there are 2 activities here. One of the reasons I chose this is you have a graphic story. You have a kind of cartoon-based story. And I don't know if you can read this on the right now, but you will be able to read it when you get the slides. And basically, we have a new boy in town. His name is Kai, And one of the children doesn't want to play with him because they said Kai is just smaller and he's slower, and so he's not going to be very good at playing soccer or football. And the other boy says, "Oh, okay, well, then we won't play with Kai." But somebody else says, "Oh, now wait a minute. Kai's my friend. We could play, all of us could play soccer together." And so there's another nice activity here, which promotes self assessment. Um, how good are you at sharing your toys? From a 1 to 5. And by the way, this is so often used in so many different ways in terms of assessments. But here's a self assessment. I can help my friends. How good am I at that? Am I just okay with a 1, or am I very good? And we can play together. But I also like here the personalization where now the child is asked to draw a picture of being a good friend. So, what does it mean to that child to be a good friend? Now, can you think of a wonderful way that those could be collected, made into a class collage of here's how we are good friends? Again, this could be done out of class, shared either remotely or shared within the class when it's online. But it provides a very good sense of what is the range of ways in which people demonstrate being a good friend. I think you're gonna find again, even though you may very well have all of your learners from a small area, I think you're gonna find there's a lot of differences, there's a lot of diversity. And of course that diversity spreads when we get into larger and larger contexts. Here's one that I especially love. It helps make other people happy, and think about how other people feel. So how can you make your friends and your family happy? A lot of other things seem to me to be being communicated here as well. We have, looks like maybe a teenager or a young woman who's helping her grandmother, maybe, or an elder, and making her happy. She's probably helping her down those stairs. But what's also kind of nice about this is, besides making her happy, it's very respectful. And we're going to be able to see how sometimes values actually overlap. I'm seeing a great deal of respect from this young woman to the older woman, as well as caring for her and trying to make her happy. Now, this is when we get to levels 1 to 3 in our world are all with values pages. When we get to level 4, which is for children about age probably 9, 10, we change that to a mission, because now they really are in a process of thinking as well about their own lives and their own futures. And they have the help of a National Geographic explorer who provides a quote at the bottom of each of these mission pages, which gives them time to think about. And here we have this is a very sophisticated value of helping in a disaster. So there are a lot of really good questions to help. What types of disasters happen around the world? And unfortunately, I think we're right in the middle of one. But in this case, the unit was about volcanoes, but all of our children live in places where there are disasters, at least nearby. But they know other ones. That they know about tornadoes, they know about hurricanes, they know about fires that happen around the world. Then, really important, what can you do to help in a disaster? And how can you get your community to help? And I keep thinking about Earth Day, International Earth Day, which I'm afraid we're not many of us going to be able to do anything outside. I think many of us will still be inside. But one of the things that in our neighborhood, I live very close to a national park, Rock Creek Park. And every year, many of the people who live in Washington go out and try to clean up the park. We pick up trash. We help to take down ivy that's strangling the trees. We do a lot. So to get the children to think about what can they do to help, and how can they get others to help. And now, given how interconnected our children's lives are, so many of them are social media. It would not be difficult at all for them to actually think about what could we do, and actually talk about this and plan for how we could respond. The National Geographic Explorer is doing what's called crisis mapping, and it's actually being started now with the pandemic. But crisis mapping tries to pinpoint urgent needs, but also instantly, but also to get a sense of where the next disaster is likely to take place. And I presume that this is probably on what's been called the Ring of Fire, which around the world does result in volcanoes. But see, this is a little bit more sophisticated. It requires a little bit more critical thinking, lots of really good things to think about and to communicate about and to get other people's ideas from. And when actually sharing, to share what your partner has taught you, not just what you have thought. And here, love your family. Loving your family is local, right? But what does it mean to love your family? And go ahead and type it, because I know lots of things you're going to say. It's interesting here. We're talking about not just hugging and kissing and holding hands. We're also talking about ways in which families work and play together. And so the question to share is, do you work and play with your family? And if so, what do you do? For online classes, what I would recommend is that they share pictures of their families. Then you could do all sorts of activities with that. This is partially the family in this particular photo is also part of a unit that's teaching words like big and small, big families, small families. And so you could actually provide some of that. You could do a poll, how many brothers and sisters that each of your children have. If you're going to ask them to share pictures, you might want to start by sharing a picture of yourself first. Children, well, actually, I think all of us always want to know our teachers more. We want to know more about them. And if you're willing to share some pictures of your family and talk a little bit about what you do to work and play with your family, I think you'll find that your learners will be much more willing to share. It may be that they need to ask their parents to take a picture for them, but it would be really nice if they got a picture of them working with their family members or playing with their family members. And then again, you could do all sorts of things with what's the range of things that people do with their families? How do they play? How do they work? And I'm sure you'll find some things that are similar, but you'll also find some things that are actually quite different. And I see someone is talking about taking care of pets. We're coming to that. That's really important. Okay. We also want to make sure that besides the local family, that our learners understand that families differ. Families are different around the world. And so this particular reading is about families in Turkey, which are smaller, and a family in Mexico, which is larger. And this is all in teaching young and old, tall and short, and big and small. But notice how it's doing it in a way that is not only helpful for the values that are being conveyed. What's the value being conveyed here with young and old? Of incredible love. What's being conveyed here? Wow, a big family that has, it looks like a very happy family. And some families members are different sizes, but families are different. And so as they think about their own family and they learn from each other about each other's families, they also need to think about how families differ around the world, as well as how they're the same. Okay, this value is being interested or caring about others. And what I like about this one is that children are asked to match the value of, for example, being interested in people from other cultures with more than one of these illustrations, if that's the case. And it also talks about, then really important, being interested in people from the past, because part of who we are, part of who our families are, part of who our communities are, is because of who came before us. And it could be even back toward ancient times. It's also being interested in people's hobbies, asking them about them, interested in their lives, interested in their problems. I particularly like this cartoon, for this graphic, where the little boy's asking the other little boy, what's the matter? And being interested in what people like and don't like. But the last activity on this page is to write 2 of the ways that you're interested in other people. Again, that would be a very nice place then to do a think, pair, share. So how could you share that with another person or with two partners, and then with the whole class? Both of these readings, which we won't have time to read now naturally, but I hope that you'll be able to read these later because they're heartwarming. I think one of you earlier wrote that you try to help your learners to actually develop empathy. Well, that's exactly what both of these readings do. The first reading is about the Paralympics, and I think most of you probably have heard of it. It's just like the Olympic Games. It's held every 4 years. People come from all over the world, and they actually engage in running and swimming and many other sports. The one thing that's different is these are people who have disabilities. And so you'll have a much greater sense. It almost makes me cry when I read about these people who are able to accomplish so much and then actually win medals and celebrate their strength in overcoming some of the disadvantages they had. This particular reading is actually about two people, one who is a blind skier who skis really large slopes. And I can't imagine how you could do that, even with the assistance of somebody, to be that brave. And this boy who actually is a skateboarder and he doesn't have any legs. Again, developing empathy for people who have gone through so much and also celebrating them, not just recognizing how incredible these people are, and they deserve to be valued. They deserve our admiration. Okay, this is just kind of interesting that not only are people's families different, so are animal families. And in this particular reading, we're comparing families of baboons, orca whales, and meerkats. And these are the meerkats. And it's really amazing. They're very, very different. For example, some of them are raised totally by their aunts. Others are raised practically very little, have almost no help, and are expected to very quickly be on their own. So there's a graphic organizer here to read and figure out what applies to baboons, to orcas, or meerkats. And then they have a chance to write a sentence about your personal opinions about each of the animals, and then to look at the texts again and to see, okay, what do these families have in common with human families and with a partner, again, with a think, pair, share? Which animal's family is most like a human family? Kind of interesting. And of course, there's no right answer to which family is most like a human family. There's going to be just different opinions. This is an absolutely beautiful photo that is an opener of one of the units in our world. And it's quite a famous photo. You may have even seen it other places. The whole unit is about animal friends. But here we have a very, very young macaque monkey who was orphaned when he was extremely young. An animal rescue organization found him and took him to a shelter. And at that shelter, a dove became very close. And look at the expression of love that's being expressed by that monkey, and the dove being so helpful to his animal friends. So we do have to talk about animal friends as well. And I think you can find at the end of this webinar, we'll talk about sources for other pictures that are available free from National Geographic Your Shot, which is where people submit photos that they have taken, and it's online and available to you. And here we are actually seeing people taking care of people, helping a friend, hugging, expressing love and kindness, teaching, but also feeding a pet, a goldfinch, giving a dog a bath, and then protecting elephants, and here taking care of a hamster. So in this particular case, it's caring for animals and caring for friends and probably caring for family members as well. And how do you do that? Well, you could help somebody to get out of a tree. You hold hands. There's a lot of ways. And so this would be a really nice one again that you could do a kind of a think, pair, share with. And here are just two ways of being good to animals. One, giving your pet food and giving your pet food and water. And then thinking about, well, is there more that you do when you're being good to animals, and especially when you're being good to your pet? And they could share that in with a partner and then with the group. And this is a quite different one. This one, by the way, is in a park, an orphaned gorilla in a park in the Republic of Congo. And this one is, as you can see, a baby panda. Is there anything cuter than that? In which it's respecting animals as well and being kind and gentle. And what does it mean to respect animals? Important, especially in this particular cases with all animals, but with animals that are in danger of being extinct, it's really critically important. And in both cases, we have babies, we have orphans who desperately need to be taken care of. And here's a reading on caring for baby elephants, but I think now what would be much more interesting to you is to see a video about how people take care of orphaned elephants.
Are you ready for a story? A true story? Great! This story is called Caring for Elephant Orphans. Elephants in Africa are in trouble. People are taking over the elephants' land. There is often not enough water for the elephants. Hunters kill many elephants. Because of these problems, many baby elephants lose their families and become orphans. But at a special place in Kenya, the David Sheldrick Wildlife Trust, people help, protect, and take care of orphan elephants. When baby elephants arrive at the orphanage, they are usually scared. But other orphans want to help. They put their trunks on the new elephant. This seems to make the new elephant feel better. The elephants and their keepers become very close. In fact, the keepers become like mothers to the elephants. The elephants often cuddle with the keepers. The elephants have a regular routine. They always get up at 5:30. Then, the keepers bring them to the forest. The elephants play with each other and with their keepers. The elephants often take mud baths during the day. They enjoy their mud baths. The baths clean off bugs. The mud also protects the elephants from the sun. The keepers feed the elephants every 3 hours throughout the day. At about 6
more of it, but it will be available to you online. It's a beautiful story of how even the keepers actually sleep with their baby elephants. I mean, they spend all of their time with them. It's really beautiful. And here is a nice project. I think most units that we teach should end with something that children have to actually do that brings together the information and the values that they have acquired during that unit. It brings together some of the vocabulary and the grammar. And in this particular case, this is making a collage, and it's showing ways that people care. And children cut out or draw pictures, and they glue them together in a circle, and then they tell their class about the collage. Now you can see how that could easily be done online. Children at home could create a caring collage, and again, they could share it any of a number of ways. This particular girl talked about how people care for their families, but some of the children might have actually included animals. They might have included just their own family members, but that's what matters, is how they have critically thought about what it means to care and who the people are that they care about, or who the animals or the various people that they care about, and then to be able to share that with the class. I like that collage a lot. Okay, it's also important for our learners to have a chance to celebrate their culture, to share that, to enjoy their traditions, their festivals, and actually really important for them to be able to talk about it in English, because they're going to want to be able to share it not just with each other, but also with other people, especially given this interconnected world in which they live. So here's just a wonderful example of children enjoying the traditions and festivals. And here's one at a much higher level. This is when we're at the mission level, which means older students. And this time it's value your cultural traditions. And the National Geographic Explorer is a filmmaker and an anthropologist. And she says that she's committed to protecting the cultures of the world in hopes that the wisdom of the elders is remembered. So here we have, again, respecting your elders and the wisdom that they have, also valuing them and valuing your cultural traditions and thinking about local culture and traditions that are in danger, very important. So we're at a much higher level now, thinking about not just valuing them, but are some of them in danger? And if so, why should we try to keep them? Why do we want to keep them alive? And then how can we do that? Good set of questions to actually both require students to think critically, but also to come up with some creative answers. What are some things that they can do? And here's another project. In this case, it's making a tourist brochure. And in this case, it was making it about her country, but you could have your children make a brochure that celebrates their town. Or they could actually create a brochure that celebrates their school. But the nice thing about having one about their town is when somebody comes who is a tourist, they have something that is actually written in English at a level that they can share not only with each other, but they can share with people outside to show how proud they are of their own culture and their own traditions. And at a higher level, it's not just the traditions and the festivals and the culture today. It's also understanding the history of your particular part of the world. To protect, question, is it important to protect historical places? What do you think we can learn from people who lived in ancient times? And then what places are of historical interest in your area? And by the way, this kind of activity can be done with learners of all ages, and actually even making a tourist brochure can be. There's a wonderful set of activities that were done by teachers of adults, actually of university students, in 5 cities around the world. And they each created a brochure with the common themes. And they decided that one of the things they wanted to have was museums. They wanted to make sure that people could learn something about also the monuments. So places that have historical interest, as well as what they can learn from people who lived in ancient times. And because they were university students, they also wanted to learn about what were universities like in each of these cities. What are they? How big are they? What kind of programs do they have? So, as Jerome Bruner said, we need to really understand and appreciate diversity. As he said, education must be not only a transmission of culture, but also a provider of alternative views of the world and a strengthener of the will to explore them. And I think you can see by the activities, by the video, by the photos, even the graphic stories, that there are alternative views of the world that actually this will strengthen our learners' will to actually explore these differences and appreciate them. So here's an example from a workbook of the values of accepting differences, and they're pretty clever. The first one is the difference between how people live. And one little girl says, "Your house is different from mine. That's not cool. I have a really big garden outside." And the other one is, "You have a balcony. That's cool." So you're supposed to check which of those is accepting differences. And it even uses some of the language that our children would use. And the second one is about differences in food. The differences between by saying it doesn't look good, yuck, versus, that looks good. But again, here we have an opportunity to draw something that you have that's different from your friend to show the difference. And this, again, will be able to provide you with a sense of the diversity even within your own class, if in fact your learners are particularly from a smaller geographic area and you think of them as being monocultural. And one of the nice things about values also is they can be taught indirectly and with readings, with listening activities, and with the most common units. Every textbook for teaching English to children is going to have something on clothing, and it's going to have something on feelings. And in this particular case, notice the clothing is clothing of children who are celebrating special occasions with their special clothing. And in this case, it's Korea, Turkey, and Mexico. And over here, it's how and why people paint their faces to express different emotions. And again, we always have something about facial expressions. We have something about senses. But how much more interesting is it to learn a little bit about the differences in the ways in which people express this around the world, the value. And here's, again, an activity then, a project in which a little boy gets a chance, or every one of our learners gets a chance to show their place in the world, their place in their home, their neighborhood, their town, their country, their continent, and their world. And we're going to see a little girl share hers with the class.
Or very
Here is my country.
What country is it?
South Korea.
This is South Korea. Okay.
And here is my continent.
Continent? What continent is it?
Asia.
Asia continent?
And here is our Earth.
Is it our?
Earth.
Or very good.
Oh, God.
Okay. It's just a very charming way of helping our learners to be able to express how they fit into all these different circles of the world. And now let's talk a little about protecting the environment. Here's a mission statement of protecting water. And the National Geographic Explorer is the daughter of Jacques Cousteau. I think many of you knew who devoted his entire life to trying to save the oceans and to save the animals that lived there. And so here we have personalizing it first. Where do you think the most water is used in your school? So let's not talk about the oceans. What can your school do to save water? And how can you and other students help save water? I'm seeing that we haven't got a lot of time left, so I'm going to go a little faster. Here's a wonderful poster that, again, could be made at home. In this particular case, it's trying to get people to quit using plastic and to save the oceans. But they actually could have written or could have done a poster on any ways that they could help save sea animals, because that was the focus of that particular unit. I particularly love this. This whole unit is on reducing the quantity of waste, reusing it, and recycling it. And this first slide is actually an artist who took things like beads and found objects and recreated Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night. And then we also have in that chapter a chair made out of logs, which will biodegrade. It's not going to end up being wasted. And here we have somebody who's decorated their house and their shed using as many found objects as they could. And here a little boy, for his project, has created a robot with found objects. You'll notice all the various things. There's a fork, there's some buttons, some pincushions, etc. And then when we get to the mission statement is, how can we reduce our human footprint? How can we reuse and recycle waste? What can we do in a community? And then again, the think, pair, share. That's so important that we all work to reduce our human footprint. A reading on e-waste recycling, because our children are using all sorts of technology and they need to know that not all technology can be put into the garbage, or that some things can be recycled. Some things are highly dangerous, they're poisonous, and they should not go in there, because if they do, they'll go into the water. And then also what they should do to try to recycle plastics, which are such a problem in our oceans. And what's nice here is you have a really good graphic organizer to unpack this reading. So Martin Luther King said the function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. Intelligence plus character. That's the goal of true education. I think of that as intelligence plus values. That's the goal of education. So we need to help them think critically. And the last thing we want them to do is to actually think creatively. And you can't read this now, but I think you'll enjoy it when you do. These are stories of young people who have created things that have been incredible. One is about the popsicle, which, believe it or not, a 6-year-old actually created or invented. But the most interesting for me is this one about a little girl, a high school girl, who realized that her friend in the Philippines could not read at night because she didn't have batteries for her flashlight. And what the girl created was a flashlight that takes the heat from your body to actually make it into light. Pretty amazing. And this is a 15-year-old girl. So we want them to think of creatively of the ways and they can actually contribute and think about their futures of the ways in which they contribute to making this a better world. So here's exactly a think, pair, share with these examples. What are some things you'd like to understand better, and how can we learn to be able to do better? And then finally, thinking critically and making good choices. This is a wonderful reading, and talking about all the ways that advertising people get us to buy things that we probably don't need. And first, it talks about the 5 ways: group pressure, where everybody else has it; association, if Michael Jordan is wearing them, you need to have shoes that are like his; testimonials of people who say, "Oh, I tried this and it was wonderful." Repetition, to keep hearing the ad over and over again; and then time pressure. And then the learners learn about ways to actually make sure that they don't succumb to these particular pressures. What are some things that they can do? Well, for time pressure, they can just wait 24 hours. But over here, then, they have a chance to talk about these tips and to compare with each other. Again, a think, pair, share. What's the most useful? Which do you already use? Which is a tip you'd never use? And which one would you like to try? So it's really important to be aware of why we're making decisions. And this National Geographic Explorer says that we actually have contagious behavior. It's common in humans. And I keep thinking, what a time to be talking about this with the kind of contagion, the coronavirus. But he is right. There is social contagion where somebody buys something and you think you have to have the same thing. Well, our children need to be provided with some ways of thinking more critically and making better choices, and being aware of why they're making those decisions, and thinking about perhaps a product that they bought which was a good idea, but one which really may not have been. It was a bad idea. And so throughout, I've been trying to give you some examples of how you can actually use these values and instill these values in your learners when you're actually teaching online or social distancing. And some of these I've already mentioned, but this is kind of a summary of sharing pictures of your family, your favorite foods, your celebrations before you ask your learners to do that. Ask them to share pictures of their families and hold up objects that are special, like toys, clothing, food. Engage them in polls where they can express who they are, what they value, and their place in the world, and they can see what they share with others locally and globally, and how they have the differences in the ways in which they express themselves and their values. Pardon me, celebrating with their families. And one new idea here is they could make a family tree and then share it with others. Celebrating with their community, take pictures of an interesting place in their community and share it with the class online. Group children who chose the same place and ask them to talk to each other or write to each other, and be prepared to tell the rest of the class why they chose it, and then create a brochure. And then here are some free resources that you can get. This is where I mentioned you could get free pictures that you could use when teaching values, and here are two of the links to the internet. You can also find short videos. The internet has a lot of free videos of songs, stories, cartoons that can be used to help teach values and can be added to the units or the materials you already have, but actually focusing a bit more on the values. And you could also, for some of you who are in the process of teaching online, and maybe this is the first time, or maybe you've done it before, but you need some new ideas, here's a place where you can get some ideas from how to go about teaching online. And thank you very much. But I think Dave, do we have a couple minutes for questions? I think he's probably about ready to close us
here. I'm here. We have time for questions. If people would like to ask questions, I know we're a little over time. Everyone, thank you so much for staying on. If anyone has any questions for Dr. Crandall that they'd like to ask, she and I are more than happy to stay on for a couple of minutes. I can see some questions.
Thank you so much for being part of it. I really appreciated reading your comments and your suggestions. I hope we can someplace get these all put together because you had some wonderful ideas. And I encourage you to go out and use some of the things that are here, but also some of the things that you can learn from each other from the chat room.
There was one good question I just saw, Dr. Crandall, if you think you have some time, and that was, so many of these, the routine we looked at today was think, pair, and share. And in the pairing and sharing part, we expect that our young learners may have differing opinions about what they're sharing. So one of the questions was, how can we help them to settle any disagreements? How can we get them to share respectfully?
That probably is a hard thing to do in the abstract, but I think first you make sure that you respect the other opinions, and then you ask some probing questions. Is that really what you meant? Let's go back to, can you think back to the one about the differences in food? And one person said, gee, that food, it looks good. And the other one said, yuck. I think that the natural response to that would be, how would you feel if somebody said to you that what you're eating looks awful and it's yucky? And I think, again, what you try to do is you try to personalize it in such a way that they think back, reflect on what they said, and maybe not right then will they change their mind, because sometimes children can be pretty stubborn, just like adults can be pretty stubborn. But over time, they may begin to reconsider their position. I think that would help in explaining, in helping children to first recognize that there are differences, but that just because they're differences, they're probably not all equal in value. Telling somebody their food is yucky is probably never acceptable. I can't think of a culture in which that would be acceptable. So I think that would be the way you would do it.
I saw one more question, if you have time, Dr. Crandall, and that was, do you have any suggestions for how to keep students' attention in class? And I think probably specifically in our current environment in online classes.
Wow, that's a real tough one. And I think that's one of the things that I think is really critical in online learning, is that you vary the activities and that you keep a pretty good pace, and that you continually try to get feedback, because it's so easy to just look at the screen, and I think we've all done that when we've been looking at our own mobile phones, at our own cell phones. All of a sudden we find out we're not really reading anything. We're just kind of what I would call, by my language, spaced out. So I think you have to keep constantly interacting, calling on students, or giving them an activity to do and then to report back on. But it's really much more difficult than it is face to face, no question. Much more difficult.
Very challenging. Lots of variety, right? All the time. If you think
and fast paced,
yeah,
especially with little kids, you have to change things up a lot. And when they're not there, you also want to use whatever you can in the way of gestures and of getting them to get up themselves and do things. Just because you're not in the same classroom, they still can be doing gestures with songs. They still can be acting things out. I think you have to get them involved.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Well, yeah, somebody just said give them points for participating. Great idea. Somebody else said total physical response. Great idea.
That's right.
Great idea.
Well, I know we are over time, and I'm sure all of our participants have other responsibilities that they need to get to.
Yes.
So we'll let them all go. Everyone, thank you so very much for joining us today. Dr. Crandall, thank you so much for such a fantastic session. I really, really appreciated all the ideas that you provided for different values and value instruction, in addition to the routine to use, think, pair, and share. What a great routine. And in particular, the ideas that you provided in the beginning on different rules that can be set in both physical and online classrooms, and also these ideas for how to be social when social distancing at the end as well. I know that all of you have participated are going to want to have these ideas to refer back to. So remember, a recording of today's session, as well as the slides from the session and your certificate of attendance, will be emailed to you within just a couple of days after today's session. So all the fantastic ideas that Dr. Crandall has provided, both in video and also through slides, will be sent to you. Additionally, don't forget, when we end the webinar today, you'll be sent to a very, very, very short survey. Please do let us know what you thought about today's session, but also what you'd like us to do in the future, so we can continue to provide you with useful and valuable professional development content. If you would like more ideas, not only for activities in the classroom, but for materials that you'd like to look at, please don't hesitate to visit us at eltngl.com. You can see that URL is in the important information section above. If you go to eltngl.com/young learners or teens, you'll find lots of different National Geographic learning materials for teaching young learners and teenagers. But more importantly, you can see on the screen here, we now have a free resource area for you for online professional development, specifically to help support all of you as we're all transitioning to online teaching and learning environments. So if you visit this site here as well, and you can see in the important information section on the screen, eltngl.com/onlinepd, you'll find lots of free lessons and resources that you can use in your classroom, as well as links to free professional development teaching resources and training videos, and also very clear information as to which National Geographic learning programs, like Our World or Look, have digital support materials to help with online learning environments. We are continuing to update this on a weekly basis, so please do check in, follow us on Facebook and on LinkedIn or WeChat or any of your local social media outlets as well. With that, I leave you all. Thank you so much for staying. Thank you so much for your participation. And please all have a wonderful day. Please stay well, stay sane, and stay happy. All right, and thank you very much, Dr. Crandall. Goodbye, everyone.